William stood before the ancient stone door, his hands trembling as he held the ornate key his grandfather had left him. The basement of Thornfield Palace stretched endlessly into darkness behind him, but his eyes remained fixed on the mysterious vault that had haunted his dreams since childhood. For 25 years, he had wondered what secrets lay hidden beneath the palace where he had grown up as the gardener's son. The key felt heavy in his palm, its metal warm despite the cool dampness of the underground chamber. His grandfather, old Thomas, had pressed it into his hands on his deathbed 3 months ago, whispering words that still echoed in William's mind. When you're ready to know the truth about your past, about her voice that still calls through these halls, use this key. But be prepared, boy. Some secrets change everything. William had spent weeks gathering courage to venture into the palace's forbidden depths. He worked as the head groundskeeper now, just as his father and grandfather had before him. The current duke rarely visited Thornfield anymore, leaving the ancient estate mostly empty except for a handful of staff who maintained its grand rooms and endless gardens. It was the perfect time to explore the mysteries that had shaped his family's history. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting all these years for this moment. The heavy door swung open with a long, mournful creak that seemed to carry voices from the past. Cool air rushed out, carrying scents of old parchment, dried flowers, and something else, a faint perfume that seemed hauntingly familiar. William stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to reveal a room unlike anything he had expected. Instead of the dusty storage space he had imagined, he found himself in an elegant chamber that looked frozen in time. Rich tapestries covered the walls, their colors still vibrant despite obvious age. A 4-poster bed sat in one corner, its silk curtains drawn back to reveal pillows that looked as though someone had just risen from sleep. But it was the portrait above the fireplace that made William's breath catch in his throat. The painting showed a young woman with cascading auburn hair and eyes the color of summer sky. She wore a blue silk gown that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light, and her smile held both joy and an inexplicable sadness. Below the portrait, a small brass plate bore a single name, Catherine. William moved closer, his heart pounding with recognition he couldn't explain. The woman's face seemed familiar, as if he had seen her in dreams or half-remembered childhood memories. As he studied the portrait, a strange sensation washed over him, the feeling that he was being watched, that somehow the painted eyes were looking back at him with deep affection. A writing desk sat beneath one of the tall windows, its surface covered with papers, quills, and an inkwell that still held traces of dried ink. William approached carefully, his footsteps echoing softly on the polished wooden floor. The papers appeared to be letters, written in elegant handwriting that flowed across the pages like poetry. The first letter he picked up was dated 26 years ago, just 1 year before his own birth. His hands shook as he read the opening lines. "My dearest love, I write this knowing it may be my final letter to you. The Duke has discovered our secret, and I fear what morning will bring. Know that whatever happens, our love has created something beautiful, a child who will carry both our hearts forward into the world." William sank into the chair behind the desk, the letter trembling in his hands. The signature at the bottom confirmed what his heart already knew. "Forever yours, Catherine." His mother's name, spoken only in whispers throughout his childhood, had been Catherine. His father had told him she died in childbirth, that she had been a kitchen maid who fell ill. But this letter suggested something entirely different. More letters revealed a love story that had unfolded within these very walls. Catherine had been no kitchen maid. She had been the Duke's ward, a young woman of noble birth whose parents had died when she was just a child. She had grown up in Thornfield Palace, educated alongside the Duke's own children, treated as family. But somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with Thomas, William's grandfather, who had been a young groundskeeper then. The letters painted a picture of secret meetings in the garden, stolen kisses in hidden alcoves, and a love that transcended the rigid social boundaries of their time. Catherine wrote of moonlight walks through the maze, of coded messages left in the old oak tree, of dreams of a future where love mattered more than lineage. But the final letters revealed the tragedy that had torn them apart. The Duke had discovered their relationship and flew into a rage. Catherine was already pregnant with William's father, and the Duke threatened to have Thomas arrested unless he disappeared forever. Catherine begged him to take her away, but Thomas knew they would be hunted down. The Duke's power reached far beyond the palace walls. The last letter was different from the others, shorter, more desperate. Thomas, I cannot live without you, but I cannot escape this prison they've made of my life. Our son will be born soon, and I've made arrangements for him to be raised by your parents. Tell him his mother loved him more than life itself. When he grows up, if he ever finds this room, tell him that love is worth any sacrifice. I go now to join you in whatever world awaits beyond this one. William's eyes filled with tears as he understood the truth his grandfather had hidden from him all these years. Catherine hadn't died in childbirth. She had taken her own life rather than live without the man she loved. His father had been raised believing his parents were simple servants, never knowing his mother had been a noble woman who gave up everything for love. A small wooden box sat at the back of the desk, its surface worn smooth by countless touches. Inside, William found more treasures: a lock of auburn hair tied with blue ribbon, pressed flowers from the palace gardens, and a small oil painting of his grandfather as a young man. But it was the final item that took his breath away: a birth certificate listing his father's name and Catherine's signature as the mother. The certificate revealed another shocking truth. Catherine hadn't just been the Duke's ward. She had been his daughter, adopted after her parents' death to hide a scandal from decades past. William's father, and therefore William himself, carried royal blood in their veins. They were descendants of the very family they had served for generations. As William absorbed this revelation, a sound echoed through the chamber that made his blood freeze. It was a voice, soft and melodic, calling his name. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the room with ethereal beauty that brought tears to his eyes. William, it called again, and somehow he knew with absolute certainty that it was Catherine's voice reaching across the decades to welcome him home. The voice grew stronger, more insistent, and William realized it wasn't confined to this hidden chamber. Following the sound, he stepped back into the basement corridor and began walking toward the main part of the palace. Catherine's voice seemed to be leading him somewhere, growing clearer with each step he took toward the grand staircase that led to the upper floors. As he climbed the stairs, memories began flooding back, fragments of childhood experiences he had dismissed as imagination. He remembered playing in the garden as a boy and hearing a woman's voice humming lullabies. He recalled nights when he thought he saw a figure in blue walking the corridors, always just at the edge of his vision. His grandfather had always changed the subject when William asked about the mysterious woman he glimpsed sometimes in the palace windows. Now he understood that Catherine had never truly left Thornfield Palace. Her spirit remained, bound to the place where she had known such joy and such sorrow. And somehow, she had been watching over her grandson all these years, waiting for the day when he would discover the truth about his heritage and claim his rightful place in the family she had loved and lost. The voice continued calling as William reached the main floor of the palace, leading him through grand hallways lined with portraits of his ancestors. For the first time, he looked at these paintings with new understanding, seeing traces of his own features in faces he had admired but never questioned. The noble blood that flowed through his veins connected him to centuries of history within these walls. Catherine's voice grew stronger still, filling the entire palace with its haunting beauty. William followed it toward the grand ballroom, where moonlight streamed through tall windows to illuminate a space where his grandmother had once danced with the man she loved. The voice seemed to be calling him to remember, to honor the love story that had shaped his very existence. As he stood in the ballroom where his grandparents' forbidden romance had bloomed, William finally, understood why his grandfather had waited so long to give him the key. This wasn't just about discovering family secrets. It was about recognizing the power of love to transcend death itself, to echo through generations and call lost souls home. Catherine's voice began to fade as the first light of dawn crept through the palace windows, but her message was clear. William was home at last, ready to claim not just his heritage but his destiny. The secrets of the vault had unlocked more than hidden rooms. They had unlocked the truth about who he really was and why Catherine's voice would always resound through the halls of Thornfield Palace, calling her descendants home. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as William walked through gardens that suddenly felt different beneath his feet. Every flower bed, every carefully trimmed hedge, every ancient tree held new meaning now that he knew his true heritage. The roses his grandmother Catherine had planted still bloomed along the southern wall, their deep red petals catching the early light like drops of royal blood. William couldn't shake the memory of Catherine's voice from the night before. Even in broad daylight, he could still hear its echo in his mind, calling to him with such love and longing that his heart ached. He had barely slept after leaving the hidden chamber, his thoughts racing with questions about the family he had never known and the legacy that was rightfully his. The other palace staff went about their morning duties, unaware that the man they knew as simply William the groundskeeper was actually the rightful heir to Thornfield. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, waved to him from the kitchen garden where she was gathering herbs for breakfast. Old Jamie, who tended the stables, called out a cheerful greeting as he led horses to the pasture. To them, William was still the same reliable man who had worked alongside them for years, the son and grandson of faithful servants. But everything had changed. The weight of his newfound knowledge pressed down on his shoulders like an invisible crown. As he walked past the fountain where Catherine and Thomas had shared their first kiss, William wondered what he was supposed to do with the truth. The current Duke lived mostly in London now, visiting Thornfield only for brief hunting trips. The palace operated almost independently, maintained by its small staff who had worked there for decades. William's father, Robert, had died 5 years earlier, never knowing his true parentage. William remembered his father as a quiet man who seemed to carry some unnamed sadness, who would sometimes stare at the palace windows with an expression of longing he never explained. Now William understood that longing. It was the call of noble blood, the pull of a heritage that had been hidden but never truly lost. As William continued his inspection of the grounds, his attention was drawn to a commotion near the main entrance. A large black car was making its way up the winding drive, followed by a smaller vehicle. This was unusual. The Duke rarely visited without advance notice, and he always came alone. William watched from behind a row of ornamental shrubs as the cars pulled to a stop in front of the palace's grand entrance. The first person to emerge from the lead car was indeed the Duke, Charles Thornfield, a man in his 60s whose stern expression had grown more pronounced over the years. William had seen him only a handful of times, always from a distance, as the Duke strode through his ancestral home with the bearing of someone who owned everything his eyes touched. Today, however, the Duke's usual confidence seemed shaken. His movements were hurried, almost nervous. But it was the woman who stepped from his second car who made William's heart stop. She was young, perhaps his own age, with auburn hair that caught the morning sunlight and eyes that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and compassion. She moved with natural grace, her simple blue dress flowing around her as she paused to look up at the palace facade with obvious appreciation. "Kate, this is Thornfield Palace," the Duke said, his voice carrying clearly across the morning air. "Your new home, at least for the foreseeable future." The woman, Kate, nodded slowly, her gaze moving across the building's elegant lines and up to the windows that had watched over centuries of family history. "It's beautiful, Uncle Charles," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "I can see why our family has treasured it for so long." William's mind reeled. Uncle Charles, That meant Kate was family, another member of the Thornfield lineage. But why was she arriving now, and why did the Duke seem so unsettled? He crept closer, using the garden's careful landscaping to remain hidden while he listened to their conversation. Yes, well, the Duke muttered, circumstances have changed rather dramatically. The inheritance laws are more complicated than I realized, and certain documents have come to light. Your presence here will help stabilize things while we sort through the legal matters. Kate's expression grew concerned. What kind of documents, Uncle? You were quite vague in your letter. The Duke glanced around nervously, as if afraid they might be overheard. Papers that suggest the family tree isn't quite what we thought it was. Evidence of marriages and births that were kept secret, bloodlines that were hidden. My lawyers are reviewing everything, but in the meantime, having you here strengthens our position. William's pulse quickened. Could the Duke somehow know about Catherine's hidden chamber and the letters that proved William's rightful claim to the family inheritance? But that seemed impossible. The vault had clearly been untouched for decades, its secrets preserved in dust and darkness. As the Duke and Kate made their way into the palace, followed by servants carrying luggage, William remained hidden among the flowers his grandmother had planted. His mind was spinning with new questions and possibilities. Who was this Kate, and how did she fit into the family structure he was only beginning to understand? Her arrival seemed too convenient to be coincidental, coming so soon after his discovery of Catherine's chamber. Throughout the day, William found himself stealing glimpses of Kate as she explored her new surroundings. She moved through the palace with a natural ease, as if she belonged there, but also with genuine curiosity about its history and architecture. He watched her pause before family portraits, studying faces that shared her own delicate features. In the garden, she stopped to examine the roses Catherine had planted, breathing in their fragrance with obvious pleasure. It was clear that Kate had been raised with knowledge of her heritage, unlike William. She knew the family stories, recognized the significance of different rooms and artworks. When Mrs. Henderson showed her through the main kitchen, Kate admired the medieval stonework and asked knowledgeable questions about the palace's history. She had the education and bearing of nobility, everything that William lacked despite his bloodline. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, William was working in the rose garden when he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Kate walking toward him, having changed from her traveling dress into a simple skirt and blouse that made her seem more approachable. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle and genuinely friendly. "You must be William. Mrs. Henderson told me you're the head groundskeeper. I wanted to thank you for keeping the gardens so beautiful. They're absolutely magnificent." William straightened, suddenly conscious of the dirt on his hands and the simple work clothes that marked his station. "Thank you, miss," he replied, unsure of her proper title. "My family has tended these gardens for generations. We take pride in maintaining them." Kate smiled, and William felt his heart skip. Her smile transformed her entire face, lighting up her eyes and revealing dimples that somehow made her seem both elegant and approachable. "Please call me Kate. And may I say, your family's work is remarkable. These roses especially. They're unlike anything I've seen elsewhere. Do you know their history?" William hesitated. Should he tell her about Catherine, about the woman who had planted these very bushes in memory of her lost love? The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he stood, Catherine's grandson, speaking to another Kate who carried the Thornfield name and blood. They were planted by someone special, he said carefully. A woman who lived in the palace long ago. She chose these particular varieties for their fragrance and the way they bloom even in difficult conditions. Kate knelt beside one of the bushes, gently cupping a deep red blossom in her hands. "They're survivors then," she said softly. "Like the family itself, I suppose. Uncle Charles told me we've weathered many storms over the centuries." "All families have their secrets," William replied, watching her carefully. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most difficult circumstances. Something in his tone made Kate look up at him sharply, her intelligent eyes searching his face. For a moment, William felt as though she could see right through him, past his gardener's clothes to the noble blood that flowed in his veins. But then she smiled again, and the moment passed. "I'd love to learn more about the garden's history while I'm here," she said, rising gracefully. "Perhaps you could show me around sometime? I have a feeling there are wonderful stories hidden in every corner of these grounds." William nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. "I'd be honored to share what I know, Miss Kate." As she walked back toward the palace, William watched her go with a mixture of admiration and confusion. Kate seemed genuinely kind and intelligent, nothing like the cold nobility he had expected. But her presence complicated everything. If she was here to strengthen the Duke's claim to the inheritance, what did that mean for William's own birthright? That night, as William lay in his small cottage on the estate grounds, he found himself thinking not just about his newfound heritage, but about Kate herself. Her voice had a musical quality that reminded him of something, though he couldn't place what. Her interest in the garden's history seemed genuine, not just polite conversation. And when she had looked at him with those searching eyes, he had felt a connection he couldn't explain. Catherine's voice began calling again as midnight approached, drifting through the palace halls with increasing urgency. This time, however, the sound seemed different, more complex, as if two voices were intertwining. William sat up in bed, straining to listen. Yes, there was Catherine's familiar call, but underneath it another voice. A voice that sounded remarkably like Kate's, calling his name with the same love and longing that had characterized Catherine's spectral song. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Kate wasn't just another Thornfield descendant arriving to secure the inheritance. Somehow, impossibly, she was connected to Catherine's spirit in a way that went beyond mere family resemblance. The voices calling through the palace halls were singing in harmony now, past and present, uniting in a song that seemed to be drawing them together. William dressed quickly and made his way toward the palace, following the intertwined voices that grew stronger with each step. Whatever force had brought Kate to Thornfield at this precise moment, whatever destiny was unfolding in the shadow of his grandmother's tragic love story, he knew his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The palace stood like a silent guardian against the star-filled sky as William approached, drawn by voices that seemed to emanate from its very stones. The harmony between Catherine's ethereal call and what sounded impossibly like Kate's living voice grew stronger with each step he took toward the ancient building. As he reached the servants' entrance he typically used, William paused, hearing something that made his blood run cold. Kate was awake and moving through the palace corridors. He could hear her footsteps echoing through the halls above, accompanied by her voice as she seemed to respond to Catherine's spectral calling. But how was that possible? How could Kate hear a voice that had haunted these walls for over 25 years? A voice that only William had ever acknowledged. Moving carefully through the darkened palace, William followed the sound of Kate's movements. She seemed to be making her way toward the upper floors, her footsteps purposeful rather than wandering. It was as if she knew exactly where she was going, guided by the same invisible force that had led William to Catherine's hidden chamber. As William climbed the servants' staircase to the main floor, he caught sight of Kate in the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. She wore a white nightgown that seemed to glow in the pale light, her auburn hair flowing loose around her shoulders. She moved like a sleepwalker, but her eyes were open and aware, fixed on something only she could see. "Catherine," Kate whispered, her voice carrying clearly through the silent corridors. "I hear you. I've always heard you, even in dreams. You're calling me home, aren't you?" William's heart pounded as he realized the truth. Kate wasn't just another Thornfield descendant. She was Catherine reborn, or at least carrying Catherine's spirit within her. The resemblance he had noticed went far deeper than physical features. Somehow, impossibly, his grandmother's soul had found its way back to Thornfield Palace. Kate continued walking, moving toward a section of the palace William rarely visited, the family quarters that had been closed off for decades. These rooms had once housed the Duke's immediate family, including Catherine when she was young. As Kate approached a particular door, she paused, her hand reaching for a handle that shouldn't have been familiar to her. The door opened to reveal a room that took William's breath away. Unlike the dust-covered chambers he might have expected, this space was immaculate, as if it had been carefully maintained for decades. Moonlight revealed elegant furnishings, fresh flowers in crystal vases, and portraits on the walls that seemed to watch over the space with benevolent eyes. But it was the woman standing in the center of the room who made William gasp aloud. Catherine stood there, no longer just a voice or a fleeting glimpse at the edge of vision. She appeared as solid and real as Kate herself, wearing the same blue silk gown from her portrait. Her auburn hair cascaded around her shoulders, and her face held the same mixture of joy and sadness that had captured William's attention in the painting. She was beautiful beyond description, but it was the love shining in her eyes that made her truly radiant. "My darling boy," Catherine said, extending her arms toward William as he stepped into the room. "You found the key. You found the truth. And now you've found her." She gestured toward Kate, who stood transfixed, staring at Catherine with wonder and recognition. "I remember you," Kate whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've dreamed of you all my life. You've been calling to me since I was a child, haven't you?" Catherine nodded, moving toward Kate with maternal tenderness. "You are my heart, dear one. When I couldn't bear to live without my Thomas, my soul sought a way to return, to see the love we created grow into something beautiful. You carry my essence, my memories, my capacity for love." William felt dizzy with the impossibility of what he was witnessing. "But how is this possible?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Love doesn't die with the body," Catherine replied, her gaze encompassing both William and Kate. "It finds ways to continue, to grow, to heal old wounds. I've waited 25 years for this moment, for my grandson to claim his heritage, and for my soul to find its way home through Kate." Kate stepped closer to Catherine, their faces now just inches apart. "I feel like I've lived here before. I know these rooms, these corridors. When Uncle Charles told me I was coming to Thornfield, I felt such relief, as if I was finally going where I belonged." "Because you were," Catherine said softly. "The Duke doesn't realize it, but bringing you here was guided by forces beyond his understanding. He thinks he's securing the inheritance through legal maneuvering, but destiny has its own plans." William looked back and forth between the two women, seeing now how perfectly Kate complemented Catherine's spirit. They shared the same grace, the same intelligent eyes, the same capacity for deep feeling. But where Catherine's story had ended in tragedy, Kate's was just beginning. "What does this mean?" William asked. "For Kate, for me, for the family?" Catherine smiled, the expression transforming her ethereal beauty into something almost divine. "It means the circle is completing itself, my dear grandson. The love that was stolen from Thomas and me has returned in you and Kate. The noble blood that was denied its rightful place will claim what belongs to it. But more than that, two hearts that were meant to find each other will finally be united." Kate turned to look at William, her eyes wide with dawning understanding. "You're not really the groundskeeper, are you? There's something different about you, something I felt from the moment I saw you in the garden." William stepped closer, feeling the weight of generations pressing down upon him. "I'm Catherine's grandson, the son of the child she bore with Thomas, the head groundskeeper from decades ago. By rights, by blood, I should inherit Thornfield Palace. And I'm—" Kate paused, looking at Catherine for confirmation. "You're the vessel I chose to carry my love forward," Catherine said gently. "But you're also yourself, a woman of courage and intelligence who deserves happiness in her own right. The Duke brought you here thinking you were distant family who could strengthen his claim. He doesn't know that you're about to help restore the rightful heir." The three of them stood in the moonlit room, past, and present converging in ways that defied logic but felt absolutely right. William could see how Kate's arrival fit perfectly into the pattern Catherine had been weaving for 25 years. Every carefully tended rose in the garden, every whispered voice in the corridors, every dream that had called Kate home, it had all been leading to this moment. The letters, William said suddenly. Catherine's letters in the hidden chamber. They prove everything. My father's birth certificate, the evidence of your noble blood, the truth about your relationship with my grandfather. Catherine nodded. I made sure those documents would survive, would wait for the right moment to be discovered. But proof of heritage is only part of the story. The real power lies in love itself, in the bond that drew you and Kate together just as it drew Thomas and me together all those years ago. Kate was staring at William with new eyes, seeing past his simple clothes and calloused hands to the man underneath. I felt in the garden, she said softly. When you talked about the woman who planted the roses, about beauty growing from difficult circumstances, I felt like you were speaking directly to my heart. Because I was, William replied, moving closer to her. I felt drawn to you since the moment you arrived, but I couldn't understand why. Now I know. We're connected by more than chance. We're connected by love that transcends time itself. Catherine watched them with satisfaction as William and Kate moved toward each other, guided by forces that have been building for decades. The Duke thinks he can control the inheritance through legal tricks and convenient marriages, she said. But he's about to discover that some things are stronger than human ambition. As if summoned by her words, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the room. The Duke's voice could be heard approaching, sharp with anxiety and anger. Kate? Kate, where are you? It's the middle of the night. You shouldn't be wandering around alone. Catherine's form began to fade, but her voice remained clear and strong. Remember, my darlings, you have each other now, and you have the truth. Don't let fear or convention keep you apart as it did Thomas and me. Fight for your love, claim your heritage, and write a better ending to this story. The door burst open as the Duke strode in, his face flushed with exertion and worry. He wore a heavy robe over his nightclothes, and his gray hair stood at odd angles, suggesting he had been roused from deep sleep. Behind him came Mrs. Henderson and two of the male servants, all looking concerned and confused. Kate, what in God's name are you doing here? The Duke demanded, his eyes taking the pristine condition of the room with obvious shock. This wing has been closed for decades. How did you even get in here? Kate stood her ground, her chin lifted with defiance that would have made Catherine proud. I was called here, Uncle Charles. This room, this palace, they've been calling to me my whole life. The Duke's gaze shifted to William, who had stepped protectively closer to Kate. And, what are you doing here, groundskeeper? You have no business in the family quarters. William felt Catherine's strength flowing through him, giving him the courage his grandfather had never possessed. Actually, Your Grace, I have every right to be here. This palace is my birthright. These rooms are my inheritance. And Kate, he looked at her with growing confidence. Kate is exactly where she belongs. The Duke's face turned red with indignation. How dare you? You're nothing but a servant, the son of servants. I'll have you thrown off the estate for this insolence. No, William said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of noble blood finally, awakened to its power. You won't, because tomorrow you're going to learn the truth about the Thornfield inheritance. And everything you thought you knew about this family is about to change. The morning sun cast harsh light into the Duke's study as William placed the leather portfolio on the mahogany desk. Inside were Catherine's letters, his father's birth certificate, and every piece of evidence that proved his rightful claim to the Thornfield inheritance. The Duke sat behind his desk like a judge preparing to render verdict, while his lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, examined each document with growing alarm. Kate stood beside William, her presence giving him strength as they faced the man who had controlled their family's destiny for so many years. She had spent the night reading through Catherine's letters, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed the tragic love story that had shaped both their lives. Now she understood why she had always felt incomplete, why no place had ever felt like home until she arrived at Thornfield Palace. "These documents are impossible," the Duke said finally, his voice strained with disbelief. "Catherine was my ward, nothing more. She died in childbirth after an unfortunate liaison with a servant. There was no marriage, no legitimization of any offspring." Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat nervously, adjusting his spectacles as he studied the papers more closely. "Actually, Your Grace, these documents appear to be authentic. This marriage certificate bears the seal of the parish church in Little Thornfield, witnessed by the village priest and 2 parishioners. It clearly shows that Catherine Thornfield married Thomas Blackwood in a legal ceremony." "That's impossible," the Duke repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. "I would have known about any marriage." William stepped forward, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. "You didn't know because they kept it secret. Catherine knew you would never approve of her marrying beneath her station, so they met in secret and exchanged vows in the village church. By the time you discovered their relationship, they were already legally wed and expecting a child." The lawyer continued examining the documents, his expression growing more troubled with each page. "There's more, Your Grace. According to this birth certificate and these adoption papers, Catherine's child, Robert Blackwood, was legally recognized as her legitimate heir. And this will, signed by Catherine shortly before her death, leaves her portion of the Thornfield estate to her son and his descendants." Kate moved closer to the desk, her voice clear and determined. "Uncle Charles, you knew none of this when you brought me here, did you? You thought I was distant family who could help strengthen your legal claim to the inheritance." The Duke's face had gone pale, his hands trembling as he reached for the documents. "I brought you here because my lawyers discovered some irregularities in the family records. There were suggestions of hidden marriages and secret births that could affect the inheritance. I thought having you present would complicate things for anyone trying to make claims against the estate. Instead, you brought the very person who would help William claim his rightful place," Kate said softly. "Catherine's spirit guided you to do exactly what was needed to restore justice to this family." Mr. Pemberton was now examining the hidden chambers inventory that William had compiled, his eyes widening as he read through the list of contents. "Your Grace, if these documents are authentic, and they appear to be, then Mr. William Blackwood has a legitimate claim not just to a portion of the inheritance, but potentially to the entire estate. Catherine was your father's adopted daughter, legally recognized as his heir until her marriage transferred those rights to her husband and children." The Duke stood abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over the gardens William's family had tended for generations. "This is madness. Even if these documents are real, even if Catherine did marry that groundskeeper, what does it matter now? The estate has been managed properly under my stewardship. William has lived his entire life as a servant. He has no education, no understanding of how to manage a noble household or extensive lands." William felt anger rising in his chest, but Kate's hand on his arm steadied him. "Your Grace," he said carefully, "I may have been raised as a servant, but I know every inch of this estate. I understand its needs, its history, its potential better than anyone. I watch you visit a few times each year while I've lived here every day of my life, caring for the land and buildings that are rightfully mine. And he won't be alone," Kate added, her voice carrying quiet authority. "I was raised with the education and social graces you speak of. Between us, we have everything needed to properly maintain the Thornfield legacy." The Duke whirled around to face them, his expression desperate. "You think you can simply walk in here and take over? Do you have any idea what it means to run an estate like this? The financial responsibilities, the social obligations, the political connections required." Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Your Grace, if these documents are verified by independent experts, which I strongly recommend, then the legal situation is quite clear. Mr. Blackwood's claim supersedes your own. Catherine was the direct heir before her marriage, and her rights passed to her husband and children. But I've managed this estate for over 20 years, the Duke protested. I've maintained the buildings, preserved the family name, honored our obligations to the tenant farmers and local community. And you'll be compensated for your efforts, William said quietly. I'm not interested in leaving you destitute, Your Grace. This estate is large enough to support multiple households, but the legal ownership needs to reflect the truth of our family's history. Kate stepped forward, her expression compassionate but firm. Uncle Charles, you've been living with a guilty conscience for decades, haven't you? Deep down, you knew what happened to Catherine wasn't right. You knew she didn't simply die in childbirth after an unfortunate affair. You knew there was more to the story. The Duke's shoulders sagged as the fight seemed to go out of him. He sank into his chair, suddenly, looking much older than his 60-odd years. I was young, he said quietly, just 25 when my father died, and I inherited the responsibility for Catherine. When I discovered her relationship with Thomas, I was furious, not just because of the social implications, but because I felt betrayed. She was like a sister to me, and she had hidden something so important. So you threatened Thomas and forced him to leave, William said, pieces of the story falling into place. You separated them, even though they were legally married. I thought I was protecting the family name, the Duke continued, his voice heavy with regret. I thought I was doing what was necessary. But Catherine, she was never the same after Thomas left. She grew thinner, sadder, more withdrawn with each passing day. When the baby was born, she insisted on giving him to Thomas's parents to raise. She said she couldn't bear to look at him because he reminded her too much of what she'd lost. Kate's eyes filled with tears as she listened to the pain in the Duke's voice. And then she took her own life. The Duke nodded miserably. I found her in the garden, among the roses she had planted. She had taken poison from the greenhouse, something quick and merciful. Her final letter begged me to care for her son, to make sure he had a good life, even if he could never claim his heritage. I thought I was honoring that request by employing his family as groundskeepers, by ensuring they always had a home at Thornfield. But you never told them the truth, William said, understanding flooding through him. My father lived his entire life not knowing his mother was a noblewoman, not knowing he had rights to the estate she died protecting. I was afraid, the Duke admitted. Afraid of scandal, afraid of losing control, afraid of admitting that my actions had led to Catherine's death. As the years passed, it became easier to maintain the fiction that she had been just a kitchen maid who died in childbirth. Mr. Pemberton had been taking notes throughout this conversation, his legal mind clearly working through the implications. Your Grace, this confession, combined with the documentary evidence, creates a very strong case for Mr. Blackwood's claim. I strongly recommend we begin the process of transferring the estate's ownership immediately. There's something else, Kate said softly, reaching into her handbag to withdraw a small leather journal. I found this in my belongings this morning. It wasn't there yesterday. I think Catherine wanted me to have it. She opened the journal to reveal pages covered in Catherine's elegant handwriting, but these entries were different from the love letters in the hidden chamber. These pages contained detailed plans for the estate's future, agricultural improvements, modernization projects, and social reforms that would benefit both the family and the local community. She never stopped caring about Thornfield, Kate continued, her voice thick with emotion. Even in her darkest moments, she was planning for a future where the estate would thrive. These are the plans she wanted implemented, the vision she had for how the land and its people could prosper together. William took the journal, scanning pages that revealed his grandmother's intelligence and forward-thinking approach to estate management. She understood that nobility comes with responsibilities, not just privileges. She wanted to create something that would benefit everyone who lived and worked on Thornfield lands. The Duke looked at the journal with wonder and growing respect. She always was the smartest of us all, he said quietly. Even as a child, Catherine could see solutions that escaped the rest of us. If she had lived, if I had supported her marriage instead of destroying it, Thornfield would be a very different place today. It's not too late, Kate said gently. We can still implement her plans. We can honor her memory by creating the kind of estate she envisioned, one where love and justice guide every decision. Mr. Pemberton closed his portfolio with a decisive snap. I'll need to take these documents to London for verification, but assuming they pass expert scrutiny, which I believe they will, we can begin the legal transfer of ownership within a few weeks. Your Grace, you'll want to retain your own counsel for the negotiations regarding your compensation and future living arrangements. The Duke nodded slowly, then looked directly at William and Kate. I have one request. I'd like to stay at Thornfield during the transition to help you understand the more complex aspects of running the estate. It's the least I could do to make amends for the harm I caused your family. William exchanged glances with Kate, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. Of course, he said. This is your home too, Your Grace. Catherine's plans include provisions for ensuring everyone connected to the estate has a secure future. As the meeting concluded and Mr. Pemberton prepared to depart for London with the crucial documents, Kate and William walked together toward the garden. The roses Catherine had planted seemed to glow more brightly in the afternoon sun, as if celebrating the restoration of justice to the family that had nurtured them for generations. Do you think she's at peace now? Kate asked, pausing beside the fountain where Catherine and Thomas had shared their first kiss. William took her hand, feeling the rightness of their connection flowing through him like warm sunlight. I think she will be, once we're married and the circle is truly complete. Kate smiled, the expression lighting up her face with joy that would have made Catherine proud. Is that a proposal, William Blackwood, rightful heir to Thornfield Palace? It's a promise, William replied, lifting her hand to his lips. A promise that this time, love will triumph over convention, truth will overcome deception, and two hearts that belong together will never be separated. As they kissed beside the fountain, the wind carried the faint sound of a woman's voice through the garden, not calling in loneliness this time, but singing with pure happiness as Catherine's spirit finally found a peace she had sought for 25 years. 6 months later, Thornfield Palace blazed with lights and laughter as it prepared for a celebration that would restore honor to a love story decades in the making. The wedding of William and Kate was set for the following morning, but tonight the entire estate sparkled with joy as friends, family, and neighbors gathered to witness the triumph of justice over prejudice, love over convention. The hidden chamber where William had discovered the truth had been transformed into a memorial room for Catherine and Thomas. Their portraits hung side by side, surrounded by the letters that had preserved their love story for future generations. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, and candles cast dancing shadows that seemed to bring the painted faces to life. Visitors to the memorial room often reported hearing soft music and the sound of gentle laughter, as if the star-crossed lovers were finally celebrating their reunion. William stood in the master bedroom that was rightfully his, adjusting his wedding clothes with hands that trembled slightly with emotion rather than nervousness. The formal attire felt strange after years of simple work clothes, but he was slowly adapting to his new role as Lord of Thornfield. The past months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, social adjustments, and learning to manage an estate that was both his birthright and his responsibility. Mr. Pemberton's verification of the documents had gone smoothly, confirming what William's heart had known from the moment he found Catherine's letters. The legal transfer of the estate had proceeded without challenge once the Duke accepted the truth. Charles Thornfield had proven to be an honorable man beneath his initial resistance, working diligently to help William understand the complexities of estate management while gradually coming to terms with his own role in the family tragedy. Kate appeared in the doorway, radiant in a simple evening gown that complemented her natural beauty. Over the months, she had blossomed in her role as William's partner, bringing intelligence and grace to every challenge they faced. The local community had embraced her warmly, recognizing in her the same compassion and wisdom that had made Catherine beloved before her untimely death. "The guests are arriving for dinner," Kate said, moving to help William with his cufflinks. Mrs. Henderson outdid herself with the menu. "I think Catherine will be pleased to see her recipes being served at such a joyous occasion." William caught Kate's hands in his, marveling as he did each day at the miracle of her presence in his life. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Kate smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement rather than anxiety. "Only about whether I'll remember all my vows. I wrote them myself, and they're quite long. I have 25 years of happiness to promise you." They had chosen to hold their wedding in the small parish church where Catherine and Thomas had exchanged their secret vows. The irony was deliberate and beautiful. This time, the ceremony would be witnessed by the entire community, a celebration rather than a hidden necessity. The Duke had offered to walk Kate down the aisle, a gesture of reconciliation that had moved both bride and groom to tears. As they made their way downstairs to greet their guests, William reflected on the changes the past months had brought. The estate was thriving under his management, guided by Catherine's detailed plans and supported by Kate's social connections. They had implemented new agricultural techniques that increased productivity while caring for the environment, created educational programs for local children, and established a fund to help elderly tenants maintain their homes. But perhaps more importantly, they had restored honor to the Thornfield name. The story of Catherine and Thomas's tragic love had been shared with the community, not as a scandal, but as a reminder of love's power to transcend social barriers. Their graves, finally, given proper markers in the family cemetery, had become a place of pilgrimage for young couples seeking blessings for their own relationships. The dining room glowed with candlelight as guests gathered around the polished mahogany table that had witnessed centuries of family meals. The Duke sat at William's right hand, his relationship with his young heir having evolved into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Mrs. Henderson had prepared a feast using recipes passed down through generations of Thornfield cooks, including several dishes that Catherine had particularly loved. During dinner, the Duke rose to offer a toast that brought tears to every eye in the room. "Tomorrow, we celebrate not just the union of William and Kate, but the healing of old wounds and the triumph of love over prejudice." Catherine and Thomas's story didn't end in tragedy. It was simply waiting for the right moment to find its happy ending through their descendants. Kate stood to respond, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the assembled company. "We gather not just as witnesses to a wedding, but as a community united by shared values of love, justice, and compassion. The Thornfield estate has always been more than just land and buildings. It's been home to generations of families who have worked together to build something beautiful. Tomorrow, William and I pledge not just our love to each other, but our commitment to maintaining that tradition of community and care." After dinner, guests moved to the ballroom where Catherine and Thomas had danced in secret so many years ago. A small orchestra played traditional melodies while couples swayed beneath chandeliers that cast rainbow patterns on the polished floor. William and Kate shared several dances, moving together with natural grace that suggested they had been partners far longer than 6 months. As the evening progressed, guests began sharing stories and memories that wove William and Kate's celebration into the broader tapestry of Thornfield's history. Elderly tenants spoke of William's kindness during difficult times, of his knowledge of the land, and his genuine concern for their welfare. Local families praised Kate's efforts to improve education and health care in the surrounding villages, her ability to bridge social classes with warmth and intelligence. But it was old Jamie from the stables who provided the evening's most moving moment. The grizzled man had worked at Thornfield for over 50 years, arriving as a young boy shortly after Catherine's death. Standing with obvious emotion, He addressed the assembled company in his rough country accent. "I remember the day young William was born," Jamie said, his voice thick with feeling. His grandfather Thomas came to the stables, tears streaming down his face, holding this tiny baby and saying, "This child carries Catherine's blood, carries her spirit." Thomas spent his whole life protecting that secret, making sure William grew up safe and loved even if he couldn't claim his birthright. I think Thomas would be proud to see his grandson finally taking his rightful place, bringing honor back to the love that created him. As the formal celebration wound down and guests began departing for their homes, William and Kate found themselves alone in the memorial room with Catherine's portrait. The painted eyes seemed to watch them with maternal blessing as they sat together on the small sofa Thomas had placed there decades ago for his private vigils. "Do you think they're together now?" Kate asked, studying the portrait that had guided her to Thornfield. "Catherine and Thomas?" William nodded, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded his family for generations. "I can feel their happiness. It's been building all evening, growing stronger with each toast and blessing. They're not calling through the halls anymore. They're celebrating." Kate leaned against William's shoulder, her voice soft with wonder. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. 6 months ago, I was just Charles's distant niece, feeling lost and incomplete. Now I'm about to marry my soulmate and become mistress of the most beautiful estate in England. It's real," William assured her, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "We're real. This love that brought us together is real, and tomorrow we'll make vows that ensure it lasts forever." As they prepared to retire for the night, each to their separate chambers for this final evening of propriety, Kate paused at the memorial room's threshold. "Thank you, Catherine," she whispered to the portrait, "for waiting, for watching over us, for making sure love finally triumphed." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with spring flowers blooming throughout the estate as if nature itself was celebrating. The small parish church was filled to capacity with guests from across the county, all eager to witness the union that had captured the imagination of everyone who heard the story. Kate walked down the aisle on the Duke's arm, wearing Catherine's restored wedding dress that had been carefully preserved in the hidden chamber. The gown had been altered to fit perfectly, its silk and lace still beautiful after decades of careful storage. In her hand, Kate carried a bouquet of roses from Catherine's garden, their deep red petals a living link to the past. William waited at the altar, his heart soaring as he watched his bride approach. Beside him stood the village priest, the same elderly clergyman who had performed Catherine and Thomas's secret ceremony 26 years earlier. The old man's eyes sparkled with joy as he prepared to unite another generation of lovers whose devotion had overcome every obstacle. The vows William and Kate exchanged were both traditional and deeply personal, promising not just love and fidelity, but also a commitment to honoring the memory of those who had sacrificed for their happiness. When they pledged to care for the Thornfield estate and its people with justice and compassion, the entire congregation seemed to hold its breath with emotion. As the priest pronounced them husband and wife, a shaft of sunlight broke through the church's stained glass windows, bathing the couple in colors of gold and blue. In that moment, guests later swore they heard the faint sound of bells ringing, though the church bells remained silent until the official celebration began. The wedding feast at Thornfield Palace was a joyous affair that lasted well into the evening. Tenants and nobility mingled freely, united by their shared happiness for the couple who had brought such positive change to their community. The Duke gave another heartfelt toast, formally welcoming William as both heir and nephew, while Kate's friend from her previous life marveled at the fairy tale transformation that had brought her such perfect happiness. As night fell and the last guest departed, William and Kate stood together on the palace steps, looking out over the estate that was now truly their home. The gardens sparkled with lanterns that would burn all night in celebration, and the sound of distant laughter carried on the warm evening breeze. "Listen," Kate said suddenly, tilting her head toward the palace. "Do you hear it?" William listened carefully, then smiled as he caught the faint sound that had become the most beautiful music he knew. Catherine's voice, no longer calling in loneliness or pain, but singing with pure joy as she finally celebrated the love story that had found its happy ending. The voice grew stronger, joined by what sounded like Thomas's deeper tones, and then by a whole chorus of spirits who had waited generations to witness this moment of triumph. The palace halls resonated with their song, a melody of love fulfilled, justice restored, and families reunited across the veil of death. Hand in hand, William and Kate walked into their palace, ready to write the next chapter of the Thornfield legacy with hearts full of love and voices raised in harmony with those who had gone before. Catherine's voice would always resound through the halls, but now it sang of joy rather than sorrow, of love triumphant rather than love denied. In the master bedroom that had been prepared for their wedding night, William and Kate found a final gift from Catherine, a letter written in her flowing script dated the morning of their wedding. The message was simple but profound. "My beloved children, your love has healed the wounds of the past and given meaning to every sacrifice. May your happiness echo through these halls for generations to come, and may your descendants always remember that true love is worth any price. With all my love and blessings, Catherine." As they settled into their new life together, William and Kate knew they carried the hopes and dreams of all who had loved before them. Their story was both an ending and a beginning, the completion of Catherine and Thomas's interrupted love song, and the opening notes of their own melody that would play through Thornfield Palace for generations to come.